Good morning, everybody. Macbeth, we're busy with the lessons on Act 2, and today then, Act 2, Scene 2. Finally, we get to the action we've been waiting for since the beginning of the play. But before we get to that, just a quick recap about what happened in Act 2, Scene 1. Now remember, Banquo and his son came onto the scene and when confronted by Macbeth, Banquo did not pledge his loyalty to Macbeth when asked for his support, but said that he would stay loyal to Macbeth as long as he could stay loyal to the king. Macbeth then hallucinated about seeing a dagger floating in the air before him, leading him to Duncan's chamber. He had arranged before this for a signal from Lady Macbeth that everything was prepared for the murder. The guards would be too drunk to be aware of any disturbance. Then, when he received the signal, Macbeth decided not to wait any longer, but to take action in order to get the prize, the crown of Scotland. Now we find Lady Macbeth sitting in the same room or standing in the same room or court as where we last saw Macbeth. Now, just to get you into the picture, in large Elizabethan houses, which were shaped like a quadrangle, the hall where the banquet would be taking place would occupy one side of the structure, and then from there a flight of stairs would lead up to the second story with the guest bedrooms and adjacent rooms. Now, on the stage in Elizabethan theatre, the balcony would represent the upper story, while the stage itself would then represent a room or a court in the castle. Let's read then. And please remember to have your texts with you. Act 2, Scene 2, the same as the previous one, the court of Macbeth's castle. Lines 1 to 8 first. Enter Lady Macbeth. That which hath made them drunk hath made me bold. What hath quenched them hath given me fire. Hark! Peace! It was the owl that shrieked, the fatal bellman, which gives the sternest good night. He is about it, the doors are open, and the surfeited grooms do mock their charge with snores. I have drugged their possets, that death and nature do contend about them, whether they live or die. This scene follows almost seamlessly on the previous one. By that I mean it is as though Macbeth has just left the scene, the stage proper. He has gone up the stairs to Duncan's chamber, and now she enters, waiting for him to return with the deed done. Now, when she starts speaking, it is a soliloquy. Now, you remember soliloquy? An actor alone on stage, voicing his or her own thoughts for the benefit of the audience. She comments on the process of subduing the gods and the effect that it had on her. She gave them some drink, some merrymaking, so they partied, and of course she drank some herself. The effect was different. The gods became drunk. She became bold, courageous. They became quenched. Their fire was put out. It removed their passion. But her fire became more violent. She became more passionate. But although she's excited, Lady Macbeth is extremely worried. She's jittery, jumpy. She hears a noise and immediately fears that Macbeth is discovered. She reassures herself that she only heard an owl hooting. She calls the owl the fatal bellman. Now, that's, of course, a personification. Now, the bellman in those years went ahead of a corpse, ringing his bell to announce the approach of someone who's dead, when the corpse was carried through the streets, or he also went to the cell of a condemned man the night before his execution. The owl, thus, is announcing the death of Duncan, fatal bellman. He is bringing death to Duncan. The owl wishes him the sternest good night. Now, a good night, the idea of saying good night for the being of the night, the time being of the night, but also, of course, end of your life. It is the last good night preceding his death. It is stern, it is strict, it is relentless. Now, she speaks about Macbeth. Now, according to the structure of the line, it looks as though it should still be the bellman, but you can see that she is worried, perturbed. Look how she jumps from thought to thought. It is a sign of her distress. Now remember, Macbeth is upstairs busy committing the murder in Duncan's chamber. He left the doors open, and the grooms or the guards, who are much under the influence of alcohol, surfeited. They are snoring loudly. They are under the drink. Their snores seem to make fun of their responsibility, mock their charge. They are supposed to be awake to prevent harm coming to Duncan. They make a mockery of it because they are so fast asleep. She states that she drugged or laced their nightcaps. The posset that she refers to here is a concoction of hot milk poured onto beer, onto ale, and this milk contains sugar, biscuits, eggs, and more. She added more liquor to it. Now they are so drunk that death and nature are having a contest about them, fighting about them, not knowing if they are alive or dead. Of course, death and nature here personified. Let's read further. Lines 8 to 14. Macbeth speaking. Now he's still upstairs. Who's there? What? Ho! Alack, I'm afraid they have awaked, and it is not done. The attempt and not the deed confounds us. Hark! I laid their daggers ready. He could not miss them. Had he not resembled my father as he slept, I had done it. Enter Macbeth. My husband! I have done the deed. Didst thou not hear a noise? Now, upstairs, Macbeth also hears something, and he loses control. He is supposed to move stealthily, but breaks out into an exclamation. This action is cause for concern for Lady Macbeth. Macbeth makes a noise that may alert others. He may be found guilty by trying to do the deed, not by committing the deed. Notice again how she's unable to stick to one train of thought. Now she jumps to another idea. She says he should have done it already because she had everything ready. He has no reason to hesitate. The guards' daggers, which Macbeth is going to use, were ready for Macbeth. It is almost as though she feels helpless, out of control, because she cannot control what is happening inside. She wishes to be the one inside to control the situation. And then she jumps again. The structure looks as though she's still speaking about Macbeth, but now she's speaking about Duncan. If Duncan had not looked like her father while he was sleeping, she would have taken it into her own hands. Remember, she seemed to be ready to do it right from the start. She sees Macbeth approaching down the stairs and calls out to him, "My husband!" This is the only time that she addresses him as her husband and acknowledges him as her husband. It is almost as though now that he has committed this evil deed that will benefit her, bring honor to him and her, now he is good enough to be called her husband. Macbeth's first words are an admission of his guilt. He does not even have to state what deed it is he's talking about. It's almost as though he cannot mention the deed by name. His sense of guilt is too overwhelming. The ensuing conversation is haphazard. They are still highly stressed and they jump from one idea to the next. It is as though they can't even speak in full sentences. Look at the layout of the lines as they are printed. You can see that the conversation does not flow. There's chaos in their minds following the death of Duncan. Remember the theme here? Order versus disorder. Lines 14 to 20. Lady Macbeth speaking. I heard the owl scream and the crickets cry. Did not you speak? When? Now. As I descended, I. Hark! Who lies in the second chamber? Donalbain. Macbeth looking at his hands. This is a sorry sight. Macbeth is uncertain, unsettled by the noise. He fears detection. Now remember, he heard this noise upstairs still. Now he wants to know if Lady Macbeth heard a noise too. She only heard the owl and the cricket. Now the cricket was also seen as a messenger foretelling death. She wants to know if he cried out. He does not answer, he gives a question in return. He imagines hearing more sounds. He heard a noise from the second bedroom next to Duncan's, and she says that Donalbain, Duncan's son, is in that room. This increases the risk factor. If he woke up, it would jeopardize the whole enterprise. Macbeth is in a complete state of physical and mental collapse due to nervous tension. He's overcome by guilt, tormented by the horror of his deed. When he looks at his hands, they seem to present a very sad situation. Let's continue reading lines 21 to 25. Lady Macbeth. A foolish thought to say a sorry sight. Macbeth continues. This one did laugh in sleep, and one cried, murder, that they did wake each other. I stood and heard them, but they did say their prayers and addressed them again to sleep. Immediately, when Macbeth displays guilt, Lady Macbeth belittles him. He is foolish to have regret, to say that it is a sorry sight. Now remember the importance of honor, a man's self-esteem. The moment that Macbeth behaves in a manner that does not suit Lady Macbeth, she undercuts his self-esteem. She shames him so that he should be motivated to try to win back her favor and high opinion, his honor in her eyes, by doing what she expects of him. Now, however, it is as though he cannot focus on one thing. He recalls, he lives through what happened in Duncan's chamber. The noise he heard was made by one of the people in the adjacent room, most probably Donald Bain, and that person cried murder and woke the other one, which is most probably Malcolm, up. The word murder is so significant that it stands in its own line. Now, if Malcolm and Donalbain are both awake at the time of their father's death, it adds to the horror of the situation. The sons waking up while their father's life is ended. Now, I just wonder, what in the night's events preceding going to bed caused them to be so suspicious that they felt the need to say their prayers? And maybe there were some signs already. But then Macbeth states that they prepared to go back to sleep. Let's read further, lines 25 to 33. Lady Macbeth's response. There are two lodged together. One cried, God bless us, and amen the other. As if they had seen me with these hangman's hands. Listening their fear, I could not say amen when they did say, God bless us. I consider it not so deeply. But wherefore could I not pronounce amen? I had most need of blessing, and amen stuck in my throat. These deeds must not be thought after these ways, so it will make us mad. The two that Lady Macbeth refers to that are lodged together are, as I said, Malcolm and Donalbain, most probably. They prayed to be blessed, as though they needed additional blessings. Macbeth states, it is as though they saw him with his hangman's, his executioner's hands. Therefore, they were afraid. Now, to understand this reference, you must understand what happened. The executioner was supposed to do the following. He was supposed, apart from hanging, but also drawing and quartering the person found guilty of high treason. So the victim was then dragged, usually by a horse on a wooden frame, to a place where he was to be publicly put to death. This is one possible meaning for the word drawn. Quartered means the condemned was cut into 4 parts, like an animal's carcass, an animal that is slaughtered. It is indeed a bloody business. When he heard their prayers, he could not pray with them for blessings. He could not say, Amen. May God let it be so. Even though Macbeth had said, remember right at the beginning when he was still contemplating the murder, that he had said then that he would have sacrificed life hereafter. That was if he could catch up the consequences of the murder. It is still very important to Macbeth. Macbeth now loses all hope of eternal salvation. Just a quick language lesson again, vocabulary. Just have a look at the word lose. Macbeth loses hope of eternal salvation. That's the one with a 1 O. It means it is lost. The loose with the 2 O's actually is pronounced loose, very short sound, means that it's like a cap that you have unscrewed. It is no longer tight. Lady Macbeth's response is that he's making too much of it. But Macbeth is obviously perturbed. He finds it worrying that he was unable to say amen to their prayers, so he could not pray any longer. Lady Macbeth shrugs it off. She warns him not to think about his eternal salvation or his relationship with God. He will become mad. This foreshadows her own and Macbeth's madness later on. Let's read lines 34 to 39, Macbeth speaking. He doesn't react to Lady Macbeth at all. Methought I heard a voice cry, "Sleep no more. Macbeth does murder sleep. The innocent sleep." Sleep that knits up the ravelled sleeve of care. The death of each day's life. Sore labour's bath. Balm of hurt minds. Great nature's second course. Chief nourisher in life's feast. Before we go on with the discussion, I want you to take note of 2 of the motives that recur. Just like blood recurs, so we have sleep here, and we've had several references to that already, and another recurring image is clothes. Macbeth continues his account of what happened during the murder of Duncan. Someone seemed to cry that Macbeth killed sleep. This foreshadows Macbeth's own inability to sleep after the murder. Now, please remember, at the beginning of Act 1, Scene 3, when the witches were gathering in order to meet with Macbeth, the sailor was cursed by the first witch. And the captain of the Tiger, you remember, and he could not sleep for 567 nights. Now, I want you to have a look here. If you cannot sleep, you suffer from insomnia. Insomnia. Later on, Lady Macbeth will become a somnambulist, a sleepwalker. So, have a look at the roots in this word. Somnus in Latin meant night, and ambulare meant to walk. Now, in medieval times, sleep was considered to be very important. It was said to be a necessary cure for all the hardships and worry of the day. Interesting. Modern scientists also attribute a lot of value to sleep. All kinds of illnesses can result as a result of a lack of sleep. Now, in Latin countries, sleep was and is still seen as closely related, akin to death. Now, if we have a look now at these different images that Macbeth uses here connected with sleep, he uses a series of metaphors. Macbeth now explores the different attributes or characteristics or qualities of sleep in several metaphors. The first one, the sleeve of care. Now, our first reaction is to interpret it as sleeve with two E's, like a sleeve of a garment. But in Shakespeare's time, the word sleeve, spelled S-L-E-A-V-E, meant something different. It meant a thread of coarse silk, rough silk. If the thread is raveled, it is frayed, tattered, and has to be repaired. It has to be knit up. So it is the sleeve of care. It is a thread of coarse silk that has to be knitted up again. And that is the function of sleep here. The second one, it is the death of each day's care. It lets the worries of the day die. It is sore labour's bath. Now, just imagine after a very hard sports game, like playing rugby or netball or cricket or even hockey especially, how lovely it is to soak in a hot bath. Now, he says it is sore labour's bath. Sleep lets the tired body of the worker be soothed, like a tired body is soothed by a bath. Number 4, it is the balm of hurt minds. It brings medicine to cure hurt minds, madness as well. It is nature's second course. Now, this is interesting. The second course was the roast or meat, therefore the most nourishing. Pudding was the first. I would have loved that. So it is the best part of the meal that nature offers. It is seen as life's feast. Sleep is seen as a feast of life, a good part. All of these metaphors reinforce the idea of the importance of sleep and its restorative powers. Let's read lines 39 to 42. Lady Macbeth. What do you mean? Macbeth continues. Still it cried, sleep no more, to all the house. Glamis hath murdered sleep, and therefore Cawdor shall sleep no more. Macbeth shall sleep no more. This voice continued with the idea of sleep being killed. Sleep is also personified if it can be killed. And that Macbeth was responsible for the death of sleep because of the cruel murder of the king. His two titles, Glamis and Cawdor, are used to give more emphasis. The voice, and this voice is not one of those people sleeping next door, but most probably the voice of his conscience that becomes so real to him. This voice denounces him. It is as if the three names, Macbeth then included Glamis, Cawdor, and Macbeth, gave him three personalities to all suffer from sleeplessness. Lines 43 to 45, Lady Macbeth continues. Who was it that thus cried? Why, worthy Thane, you do unbend your noble strength to think so brain-sickly of things. Lady Macbeth tries to ground him in reality by suggesting that no one could have cried out like that, suggesting it was just his imagination, therefore nothing to be afraid of. She looks almost caring. She says that he is sapping his strength by thinking about everything in such a brain-sickly, mad way. The word brain-sick is used 6 times in the play. Lines 45 to 49, Lady Macbeth continuing. Go get some water and wash this filthy filthy witness from your hand. Why did you bring these daggers from the place? They must lie there. Go carry them and smear the sleepy grooms with blood. She notices the blood-stained hands and orders him to wash them. She uses a metaphor, the filthy witness. The blood stain on his hand is compared to a witness that gives testimony, declares his guilt. It's also a transferred epithet. His hands are filthy, and not the witness. Then she notices that he did not leave the guards' daggers, those that he used to kill Duncan, with Duncan as they had arranged previously when she had set out her master plan. She scolds him like one scolds a child and orders him to go back and place the daggers with Duncan. He also has to dip his hands in the dead Duncan's blood and smear the king's blood on the faces of the guards to confirm that they are guilty. Lines 49 to 56, Macbeth speaking. I'll go no more. I am afraid to think what I have done. Look on it again. I dare not. Infirm of purpose. Give me the daggers. The sleeping and the dead are but as pictures. It's the eye of childhood that fears a painted devil. If he do bleed, I'll gild the faces of the grooms withal, for it must seem their guilt. Exit. Macbeth is so horrified by what he has done that he refuses to return to Duncan's chamber and be confronted by the bloodbath. Of course, Lady Macbeth resumes her old tactics. She wants to force him to obey her orders and tax his sense of honor. He is unworthy if he acts like this. She takes the daggers from him. By implication, she says she is brave enough to do it. She continues to belittle him. What is he afraid of? A person who is asleep and a person who is dead look almost the same. They are images, pictures of the other. A child sees a picture of a devil as something to be afraid of. So he, Macbeth, is as immature as a child. The child sees the painting as the devil, but it is not. The theme again, appearance versus reality. Lady Macbeth's thoughts jump to what will happen in Duncan's room. She will have to dip her hands in the warm blood of Duncan and smear the faces of the guards. Take note of the motive of blood. It runs very strongly through this whole scene. She will gild or cover the faces of the guards with a layer of blood to decorate them almost, because gilding is a decorative technique. It's a term for applying a very thin coating of gold film to solid surfaces like wood or metal or something like that. So it was used for decoration. This is actually a horrifying image, but as the critique in this Arden Shakespeare that I use as my source says, those who are upset by all the blood in Macbeth should find themselves a more genteel author. Now, she creates a pun. She says she wants to apply the blood to their faces, gild their faces, so that they will appear guilty. So the pun, the play on words between gild and guilt then. But this is not the guilt of the gods, the so-called guilt that they want to create. Lines 56 to 62. Macbeth now alone on stage. There's a knocking heard. Whence is that knocking? How is it with me when every noise appalls me? What hands are these? Ha! They pluck out mine eyes. Will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hand? No. This my hand will rather the multitudinous seas incarnadine, making the green one red. Macbeth hears knocking at the castle gate. In a soliloquy, he states that he's disturbed by the fact that he's scared of every noise he hears. Then he looks down on his hands. They seem almost unfamiliar, as they are covered in blood. He says they should pluck out his eyes. This line has a biblical background, Matthew 18, verse 9. If your eye offend you, pluck it out and cast it from you. So if your eye leads you astray, it is better for you to enter into life with one eye rather than having two eyes and to be cast into hellfire. This is according to the King James Version. He continues, will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hand? He wants to know if all the seas of the sea god Neptune will be able to clean his hands, eradicate the blood that symbolizes his guilt. His denial is absolute. He says, no, it's impossible. All the countless masses of waters, the multitudinous seas everywhere on the earth will not, but instead his hands have so much blood in them that they will color the seas red. The green seas will be incarnadine, made a blushing red. It's obvious that the immensity of his guilt is completely overwhelming Macbeth. He seems to be in a hell of his own making. Now, Lady Macbeth has been upstairs and she comes down now. Re-enter Lady Macbeth. My hands are of your colour, but I shame to wear a heart so white. She shows Macbeth her blood-covered hands. She seems to ask, what's the big deal then with blood on your hands? Mine is also red, and it does not disturb me. She adds that she would be ashamed to wear a heart as bloodless, as devoid of courage as Macbeth's heart. So she doesn't mind having bloodied hands, but her heart must be filled with blood. It must not be white. Now, they believed that the red blood in the heart, if you were wounded and you spilled blood profusely, then it would be a sign of how brave you are. A white heart didn't mean something positive like we in modern times think of it as. it was actually a sign of cowardice. There's more knocking heard, and then Lady Macbeth, for the first time, hears it. I hear a knocking at the south entry. Retire we to our chamber. A little water clears us of this deed. How easy is it then? Your constancy hath left you unattended. More knocking heard. Hark, more knocking. Get on your nightgown, lest occasion call us and show us to be watchers. Be not lost so poorly in your thoughts. The knocking at the gate is repeated. The world was shut out from the horror of the murder. This is the whole world came to a standstill. Now the world is again beginning to come to life. The reaction to the murder has begun. You must bear in mind the chain of being, the order of being, and the result of the king being killed. That would bring disorder. Lady Macbeth once more takes control of the situation and of her stunned husband. She orders him to go to their bedroom. She says it will be easy to get rid of the guilt of the deed by getting rid of the evidence of the deed. Just wash your hands. It's rather ironic when we look back at this later, when she, in a madness, seems to be unable to remove the spots of blood from her hands. She scolds him and says his firmness, his constancy has deserted him, has left him unattended. When more knocking is heard, remember the world is eager to show its reaction, she orders him to put on his dressing gown. If they were found still to be dressed in their ordinary clothes, then people would assume they were awake and they would be suspected of watching or being aware of the murder. If they had been asleep at the time of the murder, it could be regarded as an alibi. And when he doesn't respond, she scolds him for still being wrapped up in thoughts about the murder. Macbeth's response: to know my deed, it were best not know myself. And more knocking is heard. Wake, Duncan, with thy knocking. I would thou couldst. And they both leave, exhumed. If Macbeth must face up to his deed, to know his deed, it would be better for him to permanently stay lost in thought, to lose consciousness altogether. When he hears more knocking at the gate, he addresses the person knocking. It is apostrophe. He tells that person to wake Duncan. He wishes the murder undone. He wishes for Duncan to be alive again so that he can be rid of this terrible guilt. The structure of this wish tells us he knows the condition, the waking of Duncan to the knocking to wake up Duncan cannot be fulfilled. Act 2, Scene 2, done and dusted. May you have a wonderful day.